I never thought a phone call from a family lawyer would make my hands shake, but here I was, staring at my iPhone screen showing Rodriguez and Associates, while my coffee grew cold in my Tesla. They wanted to negotiate $2 billion. $2 billion. But 15 years ago, these same people called me the useless bookworm who'd never amount to anything. My name is Marcus Thompson, and this is the story of how I proved them all wrong. It started when I was 8 years old, sitting in the corner of our living room in suburban Detroit, completely absorbed in a worn copy of A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Most kids my age were outside playing tag or watching cartoons, but I found the mysteries of the universe far more fascinating than anything happening in our neighborhood. Marcus, put that stupid book down and come help your brothers with their football practice, my father's voice boomed from the backyard. Dad was a former high school football star who never quite made it to college ball, and he'd pinned all his athletic dreams on my older brothers Jake and Connor. I looked up from the page about black holes, reluctant to leave Hawking's brilliant explanations. But Dad, I'm reading about how... No buts, son. Real men don't spend their lives buried in books. Look at your brothers out there. Jake's already being scouted by high school coaches and he's only 14. Connor's right behind him. You need to toughen up. I closed the book carefully, making sure to mark my page, and trudged outside. Jake was indeed impressive. 6'2" at 14, with natural athletic ability that made everything look effortless. Connor, 2 years older than me, at 12, was following the same path. They were throwing perfect spirals back and forth while discussing plays I didn't understand. Finally decided to join us, Bookworm? Jake smirked as I approached. Think you can catch a real football instead of just reading about physics? He threw the ball hard in my direction. I raised my hands awkwardly, and it bounced off my fingers, landing in the dirt. Both brothers burst into laughter. See, Dad? Marcus is hopeless at real stuff, Connor chimed in. All those books aren't going to help him in the real world. Dad shook his head in disappointment. We'll keep working on it. Every boy needs to know how to play sports. That night at dinner, the conversation centered around Jake's latest football achievements and Connor's upcoming tryouts. Mum had made my favourite meal, spaghetti and meatballs, but the joy was overshadowed by the familiar feeling of being invisible at my own family's table. So, Jake, Coach Thompson says you're definitely varsity material next year, Mum said, beaming with pride. And Connor, how did practice go today? Great, Mum. I think I've got a real shot at starting linebacker this season, Connor replied, chest puffed out with confidence. I cleared my throat softly. Actually, I had something exciting happen today too. Mr. Peterson, my science teacher, said my essay on quantum mechanics was the best he's seen from an 8th grader in 20 years of teaching. He wants to submit it to the state science fair. The table went quiet for a moment. Dad looked up from his plate with a mixture of confusion and mild irritation. Quantum what now? He asked. Marcus, that's nice, I guess. But you know what would be really impressive? If you could catch a football without dropping it. Jake snorted. Yeah, or if you could do one pull-up in gym class. Jimmy Martinez told me you just hang there like a wet noodle. The laughter that followed felt like a knife in my chest. I excused myself early and went to my room, where my books waited like faithful friends who never judged me, never made me feel small. That pattern continued for years. Every academic achievement I earned was met with polite indifference at best, while my brother's athletic accomplishments were celebrated like national holidays. When I won the regional science fair in 9th grade, Dad's response was, "That's nice, son, but Jake just broke the school rushing record." The real breaking point came during my 16th birthday dinner. I'd been hoping, foolishly in retrospect, that this milestone might be different. Maybe they'd finally see me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. "Happy birthday, Marcus," Mum said, bringing out a small cake with 16 candles. "Make a wish." I closed my eyes and wished for the same thing I'd been wishing for since I was 8, to be valued by my family for who I actually was. After I blew out the candles, Dad stood up with a grin. "Now for presents. Jake, you go first." Wait, what? It was my birthday, but Jake was getting a present? Jake's eyes lit up as Dad handed him a set of car keys. "Since you're going to be a senior this year and you've been such a dedicated athlete, we thought you deserved something special." Outside in the driveway sat a gleaming red Ford Mustang with a big silver bow on top. "Oh my God, Dad, thank you!" Jake practically tackled our father in a bear hug. "This is incredible." Connor got the next surprise, a brand new laptop for college applications, even though he was only a sophomore. Finally, Mum handed me a small wrapped box. My heart raced with anticipation. Maybe they'd gotten me something that showed they understood my interests, a rare book, or equipment for the chemistry set I'd been wanting. I tore off the wrapping paper to find a used paperback copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. "We thought you could use some help with your social skills," Mom explained with what she probably thought was kindness. "Maybe if you read fewer science books and more practical books like this one, you'd make more friends." The irony wasn't lost on me. They were giving me a book to discourage me from reading books. "Thanks," I managed to say, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Jake rev his new Mustang in the driveway while FaceTiming his girlfriend about his sick new ride. The message was crystal clear: athletic achievement earned love, respect, and material rewards. Academic achievement earned used books about how to be someone else. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. If my family couldn't see my value, I'd build a life where others would. I'd prove that those useless books they mocked contained more power than they could ever imagine. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During my junior year, Mr. Peterson approached me after class with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Marcus, I just got off the phone with an admissions counselor from MIT," he said, closing the classroom door behind us. "They've been reviewing applications for their early admission program, and your standardized test scores combined with your science fair victories have caught their attention. They're offering you a full scholarship." MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The dream school I'd fantasized about since I first learned what it was. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "Dead serious. Full ride, Marcus. All 4 years, plus a stipend for books and living expenses. You'd be crazy not to take it." I practically floated home that day, clutching the acceptance letter like it was made of gold. This was it. The moment my family would finally understand that my passion for learning wasn't a character flaw, but a gift that could open incredible doors. I burst through the front door to find everyone gathered in the living room watching Connor's highlight reel from his latest football game. "Mom, Dad, everyone, I have amazing news," I announced, waving the letter in the air. Dad paused the video with visible annoyance. "What's got you so worked up, Marcus?" "I got into MIT, full scholarship. Do you know what this means? I'm going to study at one of the most prestigious universities in the world." The room fell silent. Mom and Dad exchanged glances that I couldn't quite read. Jake looked confused, as if I'd just told him I was moving to Mars. "MIT," Dad repeated slowly. "That's in Massachusetts, right?" "Yes, it's where the smartest scientists and engineers in the world study and work. Stephen Hawking gave lectures there. The professors have Nobel Prizes. They're inventing the future, Connor shrugged. Cool, I guess, but isn't college expensive? How are Mum and Dad going to afford that on top of Jake's college? That's the best part. It's a full scholarship. They're paying me to go there because of my grades and test scores. I waited for the celebration, the pride, the acknowledgement that their son had just achieved something extraordinary. Instead, Dad leaned back in his recliner with a skeptical expression. Marcus, well, it's something, I suppose. But you know there's no real money in just studying all the time, right? I mean, what kind of job do you get with all that book learning? Jake's already got college scouts looking at him, and football players get signing bonuses worth millions. The acceptance letter suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Dad, MIT graduates become engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs. They create companies, invent technologies that change the world. Some of the richest people on earth are MIT graduates. Mum chimed in with what she probably thought was maternal wisdom. Honey, that's all very nice in theory, but you've always been so impractical. Maybe you should consider a more realistic path. Community college, learn a trade, get a steady job. All this dreaming about changing the world seems like setting yourself up for disappointment. Jake nodded sagely, as if he were dispensing profound life advice. Yeah, little brother. Football taught me that you have to be realistic about your abilities. Not everyone can be exceptional. The words hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, holding proof that one of the world's most elite institutions believed in my potential, and my own family was telling me to aim lower. But this is MIT, I said weakly. They don't give full scholarships to just anyone. Look, son, Dad said, standing up and putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. We want what's best for you. But all this book stuff has made you kind of out of touch with reality. Real success comes from hard work, getting your hands dirty, building relationships with people, not sitting alone reading about things that don't exist. That night, I called Mr. Peterson. Marcus, how did your family take the news? I was quiet for a long moment, staring out my bedroom window at Jake's Mustang gleaming under the streetlight. They think I should go to community college instead. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Marcus, Mr. Peterson finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. In 30 years of teaching, I have never seen a student with your intellectual gifts. MIT doesn't make mistakes with their scholarship selections. If your family can't see what you're capable of, then maybe it's time you showed them. What do you mean? Accept the scholarship. Go to MIT. Prove them wrong. 3 months later, I stood in my childhood bedroom, packing my few belongings into 2 suitcases. Most of my possessions were books, hundreds of them, accumulated over years of birthday money, allowance savings, and gifts from teachers who actually understood my potential. The graduation ceremony had been another exercise in invisibility. Jake received 3 separate awards for athletic achievement, while my valedictorian speech was met with polite applause from parents who were clearly waiting for the real accomplishments to be announced. You sure about this MIT thing? Dad asked from my doorway, watching me pack. It's not too late to reconsider. Michigan State has a good business program and you'd be closer to home. I'm sure, Dad. Well, don't come crying to us when you realize that all those books didn't prepare you for the real world. And remember, we can't help you financially once you're out there. You're on your own. The message was clear. If I chose knowledge over their version of practicality, I'd be choosing exile from the family safety net. I understand, I replied, closing my suitcase with a decisive click. The drive to the airport was awkwardly quiet. Mum cried a little, but more out of duty than genuine emotion. Jake and Connor had football practice and couldn't be bothered to see me off. Dad shook my hand at the departure gate like I was a distant acquaintance rather than his son. Good luck, Marcus. Hope it works out for you. As I walked toward my gate, carrying everything I owned in 2 suitcases and a backpack full of books, I felt simultaneously terrified and liberated. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own. No family expectations to disappoint, no brothers to live up to, no parents telling me my dreams were impractical. Just me, my books, and a chance to prove that knowledge really could change everything. The plane lifted off from Detroit Metro Airport as the sun set behind the clouds, carrying me toward Boston and the first chapter of my real life. I opened my worn copy of A Brief History of Time, the same book Dad had called stupid when I was 8, and began reading about the infinite possibilities of the universe. Somewhere over Ohio, I made myself a promise. I would succeed so completely, so undeniably, that my family would have no choice but to acknowledge they'd been wrong about the power of knowledge. The bookworm they'd mocked was about to become someone they'd never forget. I didn't call home for my first semester at MIT, not once. While my doormates were homesick and FaceTiming their families daily, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Computer science, mathematics, physics. Every subject felt like a piece of a puzzle I was destined to solve. My roommate, David Kim from California, thought I was crazy. Dude, you need to take a break sometimes. There's more to college than just studying. But David didn't understand. Every late night in the lab, every problem set that pushed my brain to its limits, every moment of intellectual breakthrough was building something my family could never take away from me, undeniable proof of my worth. The breakthrough came during my sophomore year. Professor Williams, who taught advanced algorithms, pulled me aside after class one Tuesday in October. Marcus, I've been watching your work this semester. Your approach to machine learning optimization is unusual. Have you considered turning this into something practical? I'd been working on a side project, a pattern recognition algorithm that could predict user behavior with unprecedented accuracy. It started as homework, but I'd become obsessed with refining it. What do you mean, practical? Professor Williams smiled. I mean, son, you might have just created something worth millions. 3 months later, I was sitting in a conference room in Mountain View, California, across from 2 executives from Google. My hands were steady as I walked them through my algorithm, but inside, my heart was racing. These weren't professors impressed by theoretical knowledge. These were business people who only cared about results. The accuracy rate is 94.7%, I explained, clicking through my presentation. Current industry standard is around 73%. This could revolutionize targeted advertising, user experience optimization, even autonomous vehicle navigation systems. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then the senior executive, a woman named Patricia Chen, leaned forward with barely contained excitement. Marcus, we'd like to make you an offer. $50 million for exclusive rights to your algorithm, plus a 5-year consulting contract at $200,000 annually. $50 million. At 26 years old, I was suddenly worth more than most people would see in multiple lifetimes. The bookworm who couldn't catch a football had just created something Google considered priceless. I thought about calling home to share the news, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the memory of Dad telling me there was no real money in book learning. Either way, I decided to let my success speak for itself when the time was right. The Google acquisition was just the beginning. With 50 million in the bank and a reputation as a rising star in Silicon Valley, I founded my second company, Neuralink Technologies. The name was aspirational. I wanted to build the bridge between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Sarah Chen, a venture capitalist I'd met through Patricia at Google, became not just an investor, but a true friend. She was one of the few people who understood the drive that consumed me. "You know, Marcus," she said over coffee in Palo Alto one morning, "most people who hit it big, young either burn out or get complacent, but you're different. It's like you're running from something or toward something. What's driving you?" I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. My family always told me that books and learning were useless, that real success came from being practical, athletic, socially connected. I want to prove that intelligence, pure focused intelligence, is the most powerful force in the world. "Have you told them about Google? About Neuralink?" "No," I admitted. "They think I'm struggling through college, probably failing. When I was growing up, they never came to my academic award ceremonies, never celebrated my achievements. Why should I share these wins with people who never believed in me?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Because maybe they've learned something in the past few years. People can change, Marcus." But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I had bigger things to prove. Neuralink's first product was an AI system that could analyze medical imaging with superhuman accuracy. We started with a small team of 12 engineers in a cramped office space in San Francisco, but within 18 months, we were processing medical scans for hospitals across the country. The technology was saving lives. Our AI could detect early-stage cancers that human radiologists missed, identify stroke risks weeks before symptoms appeared, and diagnose rare diseases that stumped entire medical teams. More importantly, from a business perspective, we were saving the healthcare system billions of dollars in misdiagnoses and delayed treatments. By my 28th birthday, Neuralink was valued at $500 million, and I owned 60% of the company. The quiet kid who used to read Stephen Hawking in his bedroom was now managing a team of 200 employees and fielding acquisition offers from Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple. But the real validation came 2 years later when we decided to go public. The IPO was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse apartment in San Francisco, watching the sunrise paint the Golden Gate Bridge in shades of gold and orange, and realized that in a few hours I would officially become a billionaire. The opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange felt surreal, even watching it on a live stream from our company conference room. Our stock opened at $47 per share, nearly double our projected price. By market close, Neuralink was trading at $63 per share, giving the company a market cap of $8.2 billion. My personal net worth had just hit $4.9 billion. That night, Sarah took me out to celebrate at the most expensive restaurant in San Francisco. As we toasted with champagne that cost more than most people's monthly salary, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "So when are you going to tell your family?" I'd been asking myself the same question for months. Part of me wanted to call them immediately, to hear the shock in their voices, to finally get the recognition I'd craved since childhood. But another part of me, the part that remembered every dismissive comment, every rolled eye, every time they'd chosen my brother's athletic achievements over my academic ones, wanted to wait. "I don't know," I said honestly. What would I even say? "Hey, Dad, remember when you said there was no money in book learning? Well, I'm worth $5 billion now." "Maybe start with, 'I miss you'," Sarah suggested gently. But before I could make that decision myself, the choice was taken away from me. 3 years after the IPO, when Neuralink's continued innovations had pushed my net worth past $70 billion, making me one of the 20 richest people in America, I got the call that changed everything. I was in my office on the 47th floor of the Neuralink building reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Thompson, there's a call for you on line 3, someone named Jake Thompson. He says he's your brother." My hand froze over the phone. Jake. I hadn't spoken to any of my family in over 8 years. No Christmas calls, no birthday wishes, no "how are you doing" check-ins. Radio silence from both sides. I picked up the phone with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "Marcus?" Jake's voice was strained, older than I remembered. "Marcus, it's Jake, your brother." "I know who you are, Jake." My voice was carefully neutral. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, it has. Look, this is hard, but I need to ask you for help. It's about Dad." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What about Dad?" "He had a massive stroke 3 days ago. He's in intensive care at Detroit General. The doctors, they're saying he needs surgery, but our insurance won't cover it. It's experimental, but it's his only chance. We need $2 million, Marcus. Mum's been crying non-stop, and Connor and I have been trying to figure out how to raise the money, but we're both struggling financially. And—" "Wait," I interrupted. "You're calling me for money? After 8 years of complete silence, you're calling me for money?" There was a pause. "Marcus, I know we didn't part on the best terms when you left for college, but we're family. Family helps family." The irony was staggering. Family helps family? Jake, when I graduated as valedictorian, you told me to be more realistic about my abilities. When I got into MIT, Dad suggested I go to community college instead. When I left for Boston, none of you could even be bothered to say a proper goodbye. And now you want me to write a check for $2 million. "Things were different then," Jake said defensively. "We were younger. We didn't understand." "You didn't understand what? That intelligence has value, that the books you mocked might actually lead somewhere. What exactly didn't you understand?" Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus, please, I know we made mistakes, but Dad is dying. Whatever happened between us, he's still our father." I closed my eyes and thought about the man who'd spent my entire childhood telling me that my greatest strengths were weaknesses. The man who'd never once asked about my grades, my dreams, my hopes for the future. The man who'd handed Jake car keys and Connor college money while giving me a used book about being someone else. But I also thought about the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. And letting someone die when you had the power to save them was a kind of harm, wasn't it? "Give me the hospital information," I said finally. "I'll take care of it." "Marcus, thank you. I know this means—" "Jake," I cut him off. "I'm not doing this for you or for Mom or even for Dad. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, but don't mistake charity for forgiveness." I hung up and immediately called my assistant. "Get me Dr. Patricia Williams at Detroit General Hospital. Tell her Marcus Thompson needs to speak with her about a patient named—" What was my father's full name again? I realized with a start that I'd been so focused on escaping my past that I'd almost forgotten basic details about the people I'd left behind. "Actually, get me the hospital administrator. I need to arrange payment for a surgery." An hour later, I was on my private jet to Detroit. It was time to face the family that had shaped me, rejected me, and was now calling on me to save them. As the plane lifted off from San Francisco, I looked down at the city that had made me a billionaire and wondered if the boy who used to read about black holes in his bedroom would recognize the man I'd become. The flight gave me 4 hours to think about what I was walking into. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Sarah, from my business partners, from reporters who'd somehow caught wind of my family emergency. But I ignored them all, and instead pulled out a well-worn copy of A Brief History of Time, the same book Dad had called stupid all those years ago. I'd carried it with me to every major milestone: college graduation, my first job interview, the Google acquisition, the Neuralink IPO. It was my talisman, my reminder of where I'd started and how far I'd travelled. By the time we landed at Detroit Metro Airport, I'd made my decision about how this reunion was going to go. I wasn't the scared 18-year-old who'd left with 2 suitcases and a head full of dreams. I was Marcus Thompson, CEO of Neuralink Technologies, worth $70 billion, and holder of 47 patents that were reshaping the future of artificial intelligence. The Bookworm was coming home, and he was bringing an empire with him.